Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
And a very good evening to you and a warm welcome to Newsline Live. Now then, the economy, as we've been speaking about this whole week, is obviously in the doldrums. But amidst all that, perhaps the good news is that we have a full-time Minister of Finance, which can be good, I suppose. But there's also a tax amnesty that has been announced, and we're trying to find out whether a tax amnesty will help to increase GDP and therefore also help the government coffers with increased revenue. Let's find out, because our guest this evening is Mr. N.R. Gajendra, who's a tax specialist from Gajendra and Co. Very good evening to you, Mr. Gajendra.
Good evening for us.
And I suppose welcome back to the show,
Yes,
because we've had you before.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Now, what is it? A tax amnesty, will it help increase GDP and therefore will it help increase revenue?
Well, GDP has first 5 components.
Yeah.
You have the public demand, the consumption by the public. You have the public expenditure that the government spending. Then you have exports. Then you deduct the imports. And then the investments in capital assets and housing and things like that by the people. So now it's like this, you know, there was a time when you say amnesty, the impression was the money is so hoarded somewhere, you know.
Yes.
In the 1970s there was demonetization, early 70s. And where monies were taken, hoarding is monies were taken out of the economic circulation and it was kept somewhere, you know. But in the contemporary world, in that sense, these monies that have not been caught to the tax net, that has been evading the tax net, that is in the system, you know, where it's in the businesses, assets are there, in the stocks it's there, capital assets it can be there. Other than the monies that has fled out of the country, what is here in the system, it is in the system. So it doesn't mean your tax revenues may be impaired because of the money is not getting into the formal system where you pay taxes. But the economy, it may well be there. It is there. Unlike those days, you don't have even people who have not paid the tax and evaded the tax. They might put their monies in banks deposits. They might give loans to businesses, informal sector. So that is in circulation. That money is in circulation.
So if that's the case, so then this tax amnesty isn't really going to work. It's going to be a bit pedantic.
No, we must know what is the purpose of the tax amnesty. You know, it can be for short-term revenue collection. You know, you give an amnesty, you impose a tax, and you are trying to collect revenue. Or then with the amnesty, you must make sure that systems are in place, the laws are in place. It is a deterrent factor, it's a destructive factor, so that you continue to be in the formal sector, and so it will contribute to the long-term revenue of the country. Now, if you see Sri Lanka, now what we are saying is 1% on undisclosed income. So assets or taxable supply, those are the technicalities. So it's basically assets or income. So if you say 100 billion is that is disclosed, say, you will take 1%, 1 billion. 1 trillion, it will be 10 billion. 3 trillion, 30 billion. So I don't think this is intended
for that.
Then in that case, if everything is formalized, then it should be for the future revenue. But in Sri Lanka, if we see, because amnesties, when it is introduced at regular interval, you know, monotonous regularity, it has been there from 1964 onwards. We have had about 15 amnesties.
And any positivity out of them?
Not pronounced. Even from a revenue perspective, I think what is in record stage is the first amnesty. Generally, the first amnesties are successful because people might think that they will not repeat an amnesty. In 1964, the first one, they collected about 20 million rupees at that time. And in 1965 it was amended. It's amended the 64 Amnesty Act, and they collected about 133 million. But if you want this to really work, now what we are is think we are segregating between a good taxpayer and a bad taxpayer.
Okay.
Right. Person who has not disclosed money and person who has disclosed money. Now, when you have that segregation, all these people who have evaded money, they might whisper to people, but they don't want to get into the formal system and pay the tax, because anyhow the system will get to know these people have evaded money. They will get to know. It's not going to be an absolute secrecy. We can deal on the secrecy provision also. It's not an absolute secrecy.
Right.
So now, if you introduce a system which was tried in 2002 and 3, but because of political reasons it was not reversed, and even government change. One of the reasons you may remember.
Yes, the tax amnesty was challenged in the court
and all those things.
Yeah.
Now, if you don't separate between a good guy and a bad guy, say all the people, whoever, irrespective of your status, whether you have undisclosed money or not, you go and disclose your assets, right?
Yes.
And no tax is collected, because we are not going to collect a lot of taxes. Then that means there will be no assessments made for, say, up to March 21 or March 22, and if assessments have been made previously up to from a particular point, say when it was its last budget, or when the cabinet pronounced this, then there is no segregation between good and bad. So the declaration, when it goes, no one knows. So you won't question it. It's all recorded, and then hopefully that can be there. But there again, if people think this will come again, and if you see when governments are changing, it is there. We had it in 64, 65. Then in 70s we had 3, 71, 72, and 78. There was a change in government. Then you have 80s, we had 88, 89. Then we had 92, 93, 97, 98. Then we have 2002, 3, 4. That was the one that was the
now somebody challenged it, and then it got reversed. So how come this tax amnesty is coming to pass? Is it something technically different?
No, I think that was it was more of a there were two parties in the parliament in one hand, the presidency was on the other hand.
Okay.
And this was used, and even the government changed, saying that you are bringing helping the evaders and all those things, which is true. Which is true, because the compliant taxpayers feel cheated. They have been paying, and
they paid, and then there's one bunch who don't pay.
And people who are not paying the taxes and who is evading the taxes, they are basically laughing at the people in the formal system.
So this tax amnesty is probably an incentive to people who already paid taxes to perhaps not pay taxes, because somebody like you just said is
because we repeatedly, when it is introduced with sort of monotonous regularity, you are undermining the whole tax system, and also the people who are in the net, they feel and also they feel let down. You are trying to say this action of not paying tax is a criminality. It is less immoral. So it's a challenging situation for the government. And they have whatever the purpose they have pronounced, they have to achieve. Otherwise, no point, because there is anyhow loss of revenue.
Right. shall we do a comparison? What about other countries? Where did they introduce such systems where it has been working?
Very good question. In most instances, the first amnesty, when the country introduced, was successful to a great extent. Only if there was fear in the delinquent taxpayers that this is their last chance. If they don't clean up, they will be prosecuted and they will be punished.
Right.
And money or wealth also can be expropriated. There were two in Asia, one very successful amnesty that was in the case of Indonesia. What happened there was, after the 2008 financial crisis, the United States introduced what you call FATCA, Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, where they had the power and the will, because it's a mighty country, to have enact extra jurisdictional legislation, and countries' banking system working with the United States had to comply with FATCA. Even banks in Sri Lanka had to comply to do that. So as a response to that, the OECD countries came up with common reporting standards, CRS. What that happened was, if you are a member, if you sign that CRS, then a country which has information of a resident of another country on their own, voluntarily, without the other country asking for information, pass on the information.
Right.
So you take in the case of Indonesia, because of the minorities who were businessmen, wealthy people who were alienated by the majority that time, they parked their monies in Singapore.
I see.
Right. And Singapore and Indonesia signed the common reporting system.
Right.
And Singapore, because it signed the common reporting system, it has to divulge the information to Indonesia of the residents.
Right.
But the salient feature in this CRS system is, common reporting system is, Singapore couldn't use that information to their advantage.
No.
They can't use it.
Yeah.
But they have to the countries whose residents' monies are here, without the other country asking when. So Indonesia got the information under the system. They are one of the great beneficiaries. And about $300 billion fled away from Singapore.
Wow.
And went into Indonesia, and at that time financial system of Singapore also was sort of challenged, 300 billion going.
Yeah.
But what Indonesian government did was that, look here, we will impose a 3% penalty, tax. You bring this money. If you don't bring the money, we know the full list. We have the amounts. We will prosecute you, expropriate the money, and so that was one successful thing.
So, but that was because there was that fear as well.
The fear, because they had the information. They had the information.
Yes.
In the Europe also, there was one case that was in Ireland, where it was pretty successful. They expected only about $50 million, but they collected $750 million. That is because that was the only time they introduced the amnesty, and the taxpayers, delinquent taxpayers, were convinced that this is their last chance, first and the last chance.
This was the last bus out of town.
And that, in that way feeling, it was successful.
We'll come back to this very interesting topic about taxes and how it helps or not the economy. In the meantime, it's now time to have a little peek at the headlines for this evening's primetime news from News First. We'll see you on the other side.
News First Newsline with Faraz Shaukat.
And welcome back to Newsline Live. I'm in conversation with a tax specialist, Mr. N.R. Gajendra. Nathan, you told us these two sort of spectacularly success stories where tax amnesties have worked, but that's because there was a genuine fear that this would be the last time, and that if you didn't comply and come out with it, you'd get prosecuted big time. But like you said earlier, in Sri Lanka, tax amnesties have come out with almost monotonous regularity.
Yes.
So, therefore, suggesting on past experience that this tax amnesty isn't going to really work.
Hope it works for the government, because it's trying to collect money and also it goes into the system. there are even the way the law is pronounced also, there are concerns. You know, I think it's placed in the parliament on the 20th, so it's going to be taken up. It may be passed, but there's still time to look at it. Now, if you see in this amnesty, there is discretion given in the bill for the Commissioner General. He can accept or not accept your declaration. He can ask questions, and if he can reject it, right? He can reject it. They don't say under what circumstances he can reject it, but generally, you accept. There is no questions asked.
Right.
Reject it, and even if he rejects it, he doesn't need to give reasons. There is no provision as it is.
So that's a little bit of an anomaly.
Yeah, so it's an unintended consequence, I think. You know, you can't have conditions in a declaration.
Right.
Say,
Okay.
you know, you condition, and then you can't do that.
You can't start, yeah.
And also the confidentiality provision, what has been referred, without bringing in a separate confidentiality provision in the amnesty law, it is referring to the Inland Revenue Act 24 of 2017, where the confidentiality substantially was diluted. There are about 10 individuals or institutions where rightfully the information can be shared. You can share it with the employees of the Inland Revenue, right?
Oh,
so I mean, then it's not, you are not breaching confidentiality.
Okay.
You can share it to the finance minister for his performing the functions. You can share it to the Attorney General, Auditor General, the courts, the Land Reform Commission, Commissioners of Inquiry, Bribery Commission. So there are about 10 institutions and people where you can divulge. So, you know, these things may have to be focused, because if there is, and also you are not protected under this amnesty. Your immunity only is against income tax and VAT.
I see.
Not against other taxes.
Right.
Against customs duties, excise, it is not there. And even some of the other taxes, there are about the Schedule 3, there are about taxes administered by the, it is not there. Then you have no protection if there is a conviction of investigation under this money laundering, terrorist financing,
and proceeds of crime and so on.
Drug trafficking. It is bribery. It's not there. And so you know, one can trigger to the other. So when you are not protected, I think Malaysia also, they say it's reported one of the reasons it was not successful because these other criminal laws were not protected. I'm not saying that you have to extend to them, but if it has to work, you know, I'm sure this may have been brought in because of the financial intelligence units of the central bank, where that must be the influence, I believe, that why these laws are brought in. So if you come in, and if this information can be shared with the exchange control and all, you know, then you can inquire into this. No, there is you have to. It should be a sealed box, and it should end there if it's to work.
And so we've heard that it might not really impact on the GDP because it's one component of several. But if in a company, if your turnover is down, then the chances are that your taxes that you pay will also be down.
Yeah.
So if we apply the similar thing here to a country, isn't the real need of the hour to increase our GDP somehow by exporting and so on and so forth, and therefore then create the platform to collect more taxes and the revenue? But the collection process must be robust.
Yeah, tax revenue depends on sort of three factors. One is your policy.
Right.
Now, if you see the policy that we have implemented is we abolished many taxes. You know, basically what we have only is income tax and VAT. All other taxes have been abolished, and for that reason, and also because of COVID challenges, the revenue from in 2019 it was about just under 1.9 trillion. It dropped down to about 1.3 trillion. You know, in 2020. So the other thing is the tax administration, right? Apart from lethargy, tardiness. Most of the revenue officers are very good, but then there is non-feasance, malfeasance, tardiness. One of the reasons why taxes, the administration may have not collected the tax that they should have collected, because we had various modernization, computerization program, and the last one was the RAMIS, Revenue Administration Management.
How is that
System.
doing?
No, it was implemented the way it was prescribed, then Sri Lanka would have benefited. Under that system, the salient feature was, an important feature was, there was no file assessors.
Okay.
Right. So if a taxpayer had no file assessor, so there were workstations. You know, when there is a need, the system creates a workstation, identifies the revenue officer to handle that, and that ends with that. So, but it so happened few officers didn't like it, and they derailed that process. So that system is not functioning.
So this RAMIS is not functioning.
No, RAMIS is functioning, but this element of the absence of a file assessor, now the file assessors are there.
Okay.
So they sleep over the file and they have access to.
So they may not do anything.
No, and also that is the breeding ground for malpractice, because when technology intervenes, there cannot be malpractice. The human intervention has to be there for malpractice. So if you minimize the human intervention, malpractice, corruption, evasion of taxes can be minimized.
So perhaps the new Minister of Finance will take notice of this.
Yes, I hope they look into that, because because under the RAMIS system you are connected with so many institutions. So exchange of information is it takes place automatically. Transaction, even if you see under the VAT system now, technically it is the system has benefited, because so it is linked. The suppliers and buyers information is linked, so that when you issue a tax invoice, that gets caught up in the other side of the payment.
Right.
So there was a good feature. I think they should enforce this and implement it to its fullest perspective.
Now, one of the other challenges that any government in Sri Lanka has faced always is the issue of employment.
Yeah.
Is there any way that this tax amnesty will help generate
it's
employment?
Like this: if the money has taken flight out of the country,
yeah,
then if that money is brought back and put into productive purposes,
yeah,
investment and in the business, then there can be employment. And if you see, under the foreign exchange 2017, there was a incentive given if you bring back the money.
Yeah.
If it is less than 1 million rupees, no tax, but if more than $1 million, you pay 1% tax. I believe the information I have is about 12 people only have used that.
Oh.
And none of them is over $1 million.
Right.
So apart from that, if there is money not coming, then whether the money is hoarded here is the question. If it is not hoarded already in the system, then that is producing goods and services.
And in India, when they went for a new currency,
Yeah.
what was that about?
That is demonetization.
Yes, and why would, if the government felt that there was
No, I think in India there was a feeling
that there was
money outside the system which is not brought into the system, and it was hoarded and all. But I think end of the day it was not as what is reported, not as successful it was, and it inconvenienced and harassed the normal layman, people who had not in this, who were not caught up in this, because there were long queues and for money changes. But in 71 in Sri Lanka, it was fairly celebrated. People, there were stories, I can remember when I was young, they burnt money. And there were stories, newspapers also, there were people committed suicide and things like that was there. But I think the money is now in the system. basically is in the system.
Right.
Demonetization is not a thing that is done
easily.
No, it's not done so much in these days because the money is in the system. You don't just keep the money somewhere.
And so what is, very quickly, I think we have enough time for this, the new MMT, the modern monetary theory, is this going to work? Are we going to keep printing money? When is it going to stop?
At the moment, because of the policy, revenue has impact. The purpose of that policy was to spur economic activity, in the longer term. So now the revenue has dropped significantly because of COVID and also because of policy, and I think it is clearly pronounced that this will not be reversed. So in the new budget, in the forthcoming budget in November, I don't know whether the government will look at some new revenue sources. If they are not revenue, then that is what is being spelled out is this alternate theory is of cash flow management. And unlike individual or a private entity, any government has two main sources of funds. One is through taxation. Other one is you print money. Print money is not physical printing, increasing the supply of money. When government borrows from the central bank, that is printing. Money circulation is printing. So if you under the MMT, the theory that is not that many countries can follow, only countries who have strong international currencies can think of doing that. Under that theory is you to meet your budgetary requirement, to expenditure, social welfare program and other expenses, you don't rely on taxes. You print your own money. Now if tomorrow, if you are allowed to print your money and if it is going to be accepted by all, then you won't work. You don't need to earn.
You just print it.
You just print it, right? So, but say, I think the country that has a strong currency like US, you can do that, But here this has to be a short-term measure. You can't go on printing because there will be too much money chasing too few goods, and the prices over a period of time can go up, and your exchange rate also can be challenged.
Very quickly, it's a yes or no thing. Will it help if we only tax, the very wealthy very high rate of tax?
No, basically now the taxation is only on the higher income people. If
so
you see,
low people don't.
No, say if basically a person gets less than 3 million rupees a year, he doesn't pay any tax.
Okay.
They have about 650,000 PAY employees. Now it has dropped to about 60,000 people. And also in the case of businesses, over 300 million only are liable for VAT. It's a tidy sum. So it's the tax base has eroded, but that doesn't mean you can go and tax exorbitant amount. That's not going to work,
Mr. Gajendra, thank you very much for being on Newsline Live. It's been interesting listening to you. It's now time for the primetime news from News First. Take care and God bless you.